The girl had simply forgotten to put on her jacket, but her stepfather's attention had completely shifted away from her mother and became fixed firmly on the girl.
Rope is called line.
At that moment, neither the mother nor the daughter had any idea of the danger approaching. However, in the middle of the night, the girl was suddenly awakened by a strange noise. A powerful sense of danger instantly washed over her. When she cautiously peeked out from the cabin, she was shocked to see her mother being held hostage by several armed men. At first, the girl thought they were merely after money, so she instinctively retreated into the cabin and found a pistol for protection. But when she looked out again, she witnessed a horrifying scene. Ellie hid in the cabin in terror. Even worse, the attackers set the yacht on fire before leaving. At that moment, the entire yacht was engulfed in flames. Ellie quickly grabbed a fire extinguisher and fought the blaze. After the flames were finally extinguished, Ellie discovered that her mother was gone forever. Consumed by grief, she failed to notice that her stepfather John's body had mysteriously vanished. The next day, Ellie stepped out of the cabin once again. Looking at the devastation around her, she felt completely lost, but she could not allow those emotions to control her. After sorting through her mother's belongings, Ellie began trying to save herself. She dug out several fire-damaged communication devices and tried each one for help, but every single device was broken beyond use. Any hope of rescue seemed completely gone. Ellie fell into despair once again. Just then, a strange sound suddenly came from the water. Remaining alert, Ellie immediately went to investigate. To her shock, John, who had been presumed dead, had somehow survived. Without hesitation, Ellie reached out and pulled the injured John aboard. She quickly found some gauze and gave his wounds emergency treatment. Then, under John's guidance, they worked together to raise the sail. The battered vessel finally caught the wind and began moving across the sea again. But the intense labor left the girl exhausted. She intended to return to the cabin and rest for a while. However, she accidentally noticed a photo album lying in the corner. Ellie casually picked it up and began flipping through it. The next second, her entire body began trembling. The people posing with John in the photos were the very criminals from the previous night. It turned out that John had known those criminals all along. A massive sense of danger instantly overwhelmed Ellie. She rushed out of the cabin and tightly bound John with ropes. At the same time, she confiscated the knife he carried with him. Ellie refused to let anything strange happen again. However, when she turned around to adjust the sail, John, who had been tied up moments earlier, had vanished. Ellie was terrified. She immediately drew the knife, held her breath, and carefully searched the boat. Fortunately, John suddenly stepped out on his own. Seeing this, Ellie instantly became more alert. She demanded to know how he had gotten there. After learning that John had only gone to the restroom, Ellie relaxed slightly. John then warned Ellie, with a serious expression, that a violent storm was approaching. They had to repair the generator and return to land as soon as possible. Otherwise, both of them would perish at sea.
You know them. Why did you lie about not knowing those men?
They're monsters, Rose. The less you know, the better.
At this critical moment, Ellie could only put aside her suspicions. The two of them worked desperately to repair the equipment, but they still could not fix the generator. With no other choice, they left their fate to the sea. Fortunately, fate had not completely abandoned them. Before long, a lonely island appeared on the horizon. The sight of hope in such a desperate situation instantly lifted Ellie's spirits. She immediately changed course and headed straight for the island at full speed. After reaching shallow waters, they abandoned the boat and switched to an inflatable raft. However, due to her lack of experience on the water, Ellie accidentally dropped the paddle into the sea. She hurriedly reached for it, but accidentally fell into the water. At that critical moment, John jumped into the ocean without hesitation. He swam with Ellie all the way to the island. This incident finally made Ellie trust John completely. After a brief rest, the two began exploring the island together, but harsh reality shattered their hopes once again. It was truly an isolated island. There were no supplies, no escape routes, and perhaps even greater dangers lurking unseen. How could two desperate survivors possibly stay alive in such a barren place? Ellie stood on the island, staring at John. The images from the photo album replayed repeatedly in her mind. So did the moments when he mysteriously vanished and reappeared. Reason told her to remain cautious, while her instincts whispered something else. In a place without rules, suspicion and dependence were simply two sides of the same risk. In my view, this film is not really about survival or shocking twists. It is about the continuous collapse and reconstruction of trust and reality under extreme uncertainty. At first, Ellie believed she was facing external threats, robbers, fire, and survival on a deserted island. But as events unfolded, she realized that what truly drives people to the edge is not the events themselves. It is the unsettling gaps between events, and the way every conclusion is shattered by the very next moment. In such an environment, her growth is not about becoming tougher. Instead, she gradually realizes that the world does not offer a clear truth for people to rely on. Most of the time, people can only make choices with incomplete information, and every choice carries the risk of being wrong. So when she stands on that island, the question is no longer whether they can survive. The real question becomes whether she can still trust her own judgment. That is the cruelest part. Fear no longer comes from the outside world. It comes from the instability of one's own perception of reality.